Welcome to another episode of Unlocked, where we talk about unlocking the potential of people. Today, Gary DePaul is my guest, and we are going to talk about the element of psychological safety. This is a topic that is probably weaved into a lot of my shows, but never have we exclusively just talked about that topic. Now, let me introduce you to Gary. Gary has been doing leadership consulting for about 2 decades. He's worked with Lowe, Fidelity, Johnson Controls. He does leadership consulting and speaking. So he actually has a new keynote that he talks about psychological safety, and that's why we're going to hone in on this. He also has some books. He's authored 9 Practices of 21st Century Leadership, which he just did a new issue of that. And then What the Heck is Leadership and Why Should I Care is his other book. So you should check that out. He also teaches at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte, and he has a podcast called the Unlabeled Leadership Podcast. So you can check him out there as well. Now, Gary and I, we get into some really cool stuff. We talk about what some current, problems are with companies and executives and leaders and why they violate this psychological safety issue, and how do we get it back? He gives some tips and some ideas about, hey, maybe you've burned some bridges in the past. How do we actually recover and recreate a culture of psychological safety, or create one if we've never had one before? That's important. And I want you to listen, because that's nearer to the end. We talk about leading up to that, all types of elements. We talk about this really cool idea, which I learned about. He taught me about this fundamental attribution error and what that is. So you're going to have to stay tuned to figure out more about that one. Okay, are y'all ready? Here we go. Hey, Gary, how's it going over there?
It's going great. How about yourself?
Oh, so good. It's been a good morning. It's a little rainy outside, but had some good meetings already this morning. So now I get to talk to you.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
Okay, Gary, we're going to tackle something that is huge. And are you familiar with Project Aristotle that Google conducted?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Give my audience. I think I've probably referenced it in some show somewhere, somehow, because I reference it quite often. Can you give my audience a little bit of background or insight, or what you know of the
Project Aristotle? Was a Google project that they labeled it that, to find out what makes high performing teams. And they found out 2 basic things that makes high performing teams just that, high performing. The first is something called social sensitivity. And this is sort of like empathy. It's understanding what other people are experiencing, for example, in a meeting. So if your arms are folded and you're looking down, the successful teams, the high-performing teams, stop everything and they figure out what's going on. They call it out in the open, and they have an open dialogue. And with a lot of project teams, it's crucial because people are not wanting to rock the boat, or they're not willing to speak up about a problem. They don't want to cause trouble. But when you can empathize and you see that there's something going on, it really enables you to avoid problems in the future, and gives everyone an equal voice in what's going on. Which is the second thing, is equality of conversational time. Turn taking is what they call it. Everyone in a meeting speaks about the same amount of time. That's not one person talking. I've coached a director at a company where he did most of the talking and couldn't understand why no one else would talk, So and he had trouble with performance and running into problems. But when you're able to divide that time up equally among the team members, awesome things happen.
So the number one thing, which is your expertise, the thing that we're going to talk about on this show, the number one thing that indicated a high performing team, that was like essential for high performing teams, what was that thing?
Yeah. If you have to put it in a different way, they found out something about called psychological safety.
Boom. There it is.
And those are what I described, those two things are aspects of psychological safety.
Yes.
The equality and conversational turn taking and the social sensitivity or empathy.
Good. How else do you describe psychological safety? You do keynotes on this, you coach about this, you talk about it quite often. How else do you package up psychological safety?
Yeah. Well, let me explain it a little bit differently. If you have an increase in psychological safety, then here's some things that may happen. You're asking for feedback from other people. You're discussing mistakes. You're experimenting. You're giving feedback. You're sharing ideas. And what that results in is an increase in employee engagement, frequency of team innovation, and an increase in learning from mistakes. So think of psychological safety as when team members confidently believe that they can safely take interpersonal risks without scorn or animosity. So there's this respect, there's permission, but it's also fragile, which is interesting.
Explain that. Why is it so fragile?
Yeah. It's very easy to remove psychological safety by making mistakes like shaming people in a sense, for example, in a meeting, or what's the word for dismissing someone's ideas. And if you do that enough, then you decrease in psychological safety. But at the same time, you can get it back because you may later find out, oh man, I messed up. I was really not listening to what my team was saying and coming forward and saying, hey man, guys, I really messed up and here's why. And you can reclaim that, but it's very easy to lose it by losing those two characteristics I talked about earlier, not having empathy and not having an open environment where people can express their ideas.
And then I almost feel like so you talked earlier about this executive that you've coached in the past that, talked a lot, but didn't realize why nobody else was talking, which, can hurt the psychological safety levels of those teams. It's almost the core issue is that self-awareness piece, that awareness that maybe as someone who likes to talk a lot, likes to come up with the ideas, likes to generate noise and doesn't like silence and things like that is just, he fills the space because he's scared that nobody else will, or he's looking incompetent or whatever it is, his fear is that self-awareness is what can lead to that damaging of psychological safety. Do you see that too or no?
Yeah, that was beautifully stated. It's so easy to ask a question to a team and then wait, and then you start to feel uncomfortable because no one's speaking. And then you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to answer it. Try asking your team something and then count the 10 slowly. Because what's happening is people need time to process what you're asking, especially if it's something new. And, they may need 4 or 5 seconds. But this particular director, he could not handle the silence, and he was so unaware of what was going on. And he was excited. He was passionate about everything he did in business. And that mistakenly affected the team, and he didn't realize it. So self-awareness is a huge part. You talk about emotional intelligence. That's, you got to be aware of your own emotions. You got to be aware of what's going on and how you're interacting with other people. And when you don't have that awareness, it really dampens psychological safety.
For sure. So what's the biggest mistake that you see people making when trying to build psychological safety, or when they're actually not building psychological safety? Why is that?
Yeah, I'm going to come at this from a completely different angle. So it's not what you typically hear when you talk about psychological safety. And that's this. if you're in charge of a team and things are not working, deciding, okay, this is how I'm going to solve that. And imagine this, you go into a doctor's office, a medical doctor's office, or you're a medical doctor, I'm the patient, and I say to you, I saw this thing on TV about restless leg syndrome, and they say, take this prescription, could you prescribe it for me? If you say yes, then you're going straight to a solution, and you're doing malpractice in a sense, because you're not analyzing. You don't try to figure out the problem. And a lot of times with people that lead teams, they think they know what the solution is, and they jump to the solution rather than trying to figure out what really is the underlying problem. And would you like a real quick real life example?
Yes, Gary. I love real life examples. So yes, please go for it.
Okay. Vice president at a Fortune 100 company that's in charge of learning and development. He sat at his direct reports meeting and said, everyone is going to go through project management training. We're just not doing a good job in this area, so I'm going to require everyone to take this class. Instant uproar. So he had an idea. He decided there was a problem and jumped to a solution, which without realizing what exactly was going on. And here's what happened in the meeting. The guy that created the project management training said, well, I'm not going to take it because I helped design it and I helped implement it. So I'm not going to take it. And then a Six Sigma person said, well, if he's not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And then someone finally said, isn't that what we try to teach the business, to talk about, focus on the problem rather than jumping to a solution? And that's the thing that happens is a lot of, and this has to do with self-awareness, is people tend to jump to their favorite solution. In a construction company, they were having safety issues, and the solution for the chief operating officer was send an email out saying, we need to really focus on safety and stop doing these dumb things. Solution solved, but it wasn't. That's one of the problems with teams, is when someone in charge goes from there's a symptom, people aren't communicating or whatever, and decide, okay, this is what we're going to do, without diving into it and figuring out, okay, why are people not communicating well? What's going on behind the scenes? And it's people that when you move up in organizations, they don't learn really how to deal with underlying problems that teams have. And when that happens, you tend to not have psychological safety, which, think about the Gallup polls that have come out. The latest one, I think it was something like only about, I don't know, 20, hold on a second, I could tell you. I'll actually give it to you because I have it right here. Ironically, I had it up. Okay, this was the 2023 State of Global Workplace Report. Only 31% of those thousands of people polled were engaged at work. The rest weren't. There was 17% loudly quitting, and 52% quietly quitting. In other words, they stay, but they're not committed to being there. And when that's an example that illustrates the problem of teams with psychological safety, is they don't have psychological safety. Their needs are not being addressed. And people, as they go up in the organization, they have difficulty dealing with that aspect of the business. It's easy to do the work. It's harder to lead people.
So people go directly to the solution. They prescribe the pill without understanding what's creating the symptoms. So, like you said, with the doctor analogy, right? And I think that we would be, pretty annoyed if, here's a story. You ready for this one? My mother, and
Go.
I don't know if my mom's going to even listen to this show, but if she does, hope that's okay, Mom. She, a few years ago, it was 2019, beginning of the year, she's getting these like rashes, and she's getting sweats all night and up and down, and just like miserable fever, and then no fever, and then fever, and then no fever, and it's just driving her crazy. She went to doctors, went to all types of people, and they keep giving her like, stand in front of this infrared machine for 30 minutes a day. And here, maybe it's, maybe it's some kind of infection. Take this antibiotic and then take this one. And so they're just treating all of these surface level issues. Here, try this cream on your rashes and all the things that are going on. So throughout this whole time, she's miserable, okay? Because doctors keep trying to just treat the symptoms of what's happening. She finally realizes, she gets with another doctor and realizes that she has Hodgkin's lymphoma. So she has cancer. She's diagnosed with cancer. And all of these symptoms were a result of that cancer that was in her body. And that was right before COVID. And then she has, chemo and all that other stuff that she's doing during COVID, which, was just stuff on top of stuff. But the core issue was like, how much do we do that as leaders when we look at the rashes and we look at the fevers and we're just like, just fix it, Band-Aid it, treat it. And we're not going, okay, so what's the real issue with the safety? What's the real safety issue? Or what's the real reason that we don't trust each other, or why we're not delegating work? I mean, I went on a little side note here, but I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And sticking with your side note for a moment, and then I'll get to that. When with doctors, when there's a saying, when they hear hoofbeats, they envision horses, but it could be zebras. And what that means is that maybe 8 out of 10, the symptom of a rash may be something very simple where you just have a cream, eczema or whatever, it's eczema or whatever, easy solution. But sometimes it's a zebra that's much deeper. And as people who lead teams, we tend to hear hoofbeats and think horses and think we know what's going on without doing any type of analysis or really focusing on what is the problem that we're trying to address and talking with the team about that, which rather than deciding, oh, well, we need better communication, so I'm going to have everyone take a communication course, or I'll type a memo and say, hey, email everyone, stop doing that. It's not addressing what's really going on. And that is the big challenge with people who lead teams.
So how does that build psychological safety? When we figure out the real problem, how is that feeding a psychologically safe culture?
Yeah. So think of the process. If I was building psychological safety among my team and I knew that there was a problem, I would go to my team and say, here's what I'm seeing. This is the problem. We're not communicating well or whatever. And then you do something amazing. You say something like, I'm a contributor to this. And you could apologize, or you can give an example of what you're doing wrong. And that's, you're going first, so to speak, and explaining to the team, being vulnerable with them about what you're thinking and feeling, and saying, I really want to address this communication problem that I'm seeing, but what do you guys think? What are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? And it's asking those types of questions. It's involving other people that help you get to what really is going on. And then if you spend more time listening than talking, then chances are you're going to get to a state where you're more in a psychological safety environment.
So listening, being vulnerable, collaboration, input, all those elements build psychological safety. What else can we do and those help solve the problem as a whole? I guess another thing that I've seen too is that they get some of that stuff and then they leave and then they come up with the solution themselves and come back and say, okay, this is the solution because this is what I heard. So they're kind of half doing it. They're like they're doing the listening thing. Then they go off and they just like think they fixed it. I would almost add, and you tell me if you disagree, because we haven't really talked about this yet, but part of the psychological safety part in building healthy culture would be having the team also come up with the solution rather than you just going into your ivory tower and finishing the solution. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say, is that you want everyone to help diagnose the problem and what's going on, because everyone's going to have a different perspective just based on who they are. And part of your job, or anyone's job on a team, is to protect the right of the team to speak up and be able to express themselves, and without ridicule, without joking about what the person says, but seriously listening and trying to understand what other people are perceiving.
Okay.
I think that's crucial.
Oh yeah. That's really, really good. Okay. What other aspects of psychological safety do you hit on? I mean, as a speaker, you talk about this topic. What distinguishes your ideas from some of the others that are out there? What kind of unique spin what's Gary's unique spin on psychological safety, or how you like to solve the problem?
Yeah. Well, one thing I do with people that I talk with, I take them on a journey, first of all. And I kind of start with hey, here's the big problem, and talk about like the Gallup report, and then break down psychological safety and what are the components. How can you develop that? And actually, I show some videos that illustrate some of the main points. But at the end, you got to have action items. You got to be able to do stuff with this information. And one of the things I encourage people to do, especially in management, is discuss the concept of psychological safety, then agree upon some expectations about how you're going to work with one another, about being open with the team, and, some of the things I talked about, not ridiculing them. But the important thing is, you hold one another accountable. So I need to be accountable for me. That's 100%. But I need to hold other people accountable, and that's my other 100%, so to speak. Even though 200% is not possible, but
it is on this show.
It
is on this show.
There you go. And all it takes is someone to speak up, and then when you're doing that, and especially when there's these key moments that happen where the first time someone speaks up at a meeting, what the manager does is so crucial. It's a crucial moment. If the manager discounts what the person says, or brushes it off, or goes to another person, you know what's going to happen. But if the manager acknowledges, it sends a message to everyone else. Hey, this guy, Gary, is really listening to what we're saying and is taking that as input, so that's really important. And then, one other thing that I encourage people to do with psychological safety, you've got to get to know your people, the people you work with, not necessarily your boss or your peers, but everyone you work with. The more you know about them, the easier it is to humanize them. You've heard of the fundamental attribution error?
No, I haven't. Educate me.
Oh, fundamental attribution error is really simple, but it's a difficult concept to put into practice or address. Here's how it works. I'll give a car example. You're driving down the road, someone pulls in front of you, cuts you off, and the hand shoots out the window, and you think, this guy's a jerk. He flipped me off. But the reality is, you just saw someone pull in front of you and cut you off, but you don't know why. You don't know what was going on. Maybe there was a bee in the car. Maybe the person was rushing to the hospital because her daughter was in intensive care. It could be anything. But what we do is we make up stories to explain behaviors. And then we react to the made up story. In the car example, I get upset because I think the person's being a jerk and cutting me off. Or I can make up the story in my head. Oh my gosh, this person's really in a hurry. I feel really bad that this person is having to drive in this traffic like this. We tend to be very forgiving to ourselves internally because we know why we're doing things. But when it comes to other people, we tend to be very judgmental, and we assume more or create stories in our head that are more harmful than or negative than positive. We attribute bad things to other people and good things to ourselves is another way of putting it. So with the fundamental attribution error, the thing that's interesting is the more I get to know someone, the less likely I'm going to attribute negative stuff to your actions or to their actions. So that's why getting to know other people is so important.
I love that. That is so good. It's built on those impressions that we get and how much, grace we give people in the sense of what they're going through. It's that empathy piece that you explained way at the beginning of the show is a core essence of psychological safety, a core ingredient of that. Let me ask you this question. I'm going to push back on you a little bit. I want to hear what you say, because I've heard some of this before too with some of my clients. I'll be coaching them through an idea of this and this and this and this. And they go, yeah, but that's not how it is here. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's, unpack that a little bit, understand aspects of it. I don't want to paint like this beautiful picture of how everything's psychologically safe. But you're like, okay, so I am going to come into a meeting and I'm going to present an idea and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to listen, because now my coach is telling me that I should listen. Although before I've burned some bridges and I've ripped people apart and I've told them their idea sucks, etc. And now I'm going to go, no, I'm going to be good now because my coach is telling me to be good and I'm going to listen. So everybody, this is a psychologically safe environment. Go. And then I go back to my coach.
What a great way to terrorize someone.
And I go back to my coach and I go, nobody talked. See, I told you it wasn't going to work. Nobody talking. So how do we get back? So we've burned the bridge. We've traumatized the team.
Yeah.
How do we get back to a psychologically safe space?
Yeah. When someone is very resistant to psychological safety, or they think we have that, 360 is a beautiful way of exposing the reality. And I gave you some numbers a while ago. Very few people feel like they're actively engaged in the work that they do. I mean, the numbers show it, that there's a lot of people that don't. But here's the thing. If you come to a realization that, maybe I haven't been made the environment as psychologically safe as I could, two things you could do. One, admit fallibility, that, I'm not good at this and I need to let the team know. I need to talk to them about it. And then the other thing to do, which is crucial, is show curiosity. So instead of focusing on what you're thinking as someone else is talking, you focus on what they're saying and follow up with questions and really try to understand, why is this person saying what they're saying, rather than assuming I know. And that remarkable things happen when you start to have that curiosity and you really get away from, I'm thinking about the next thing I'm going to talk about while this person is talking, which we all do. It's natural. Our brains work faster than our ability to take in information. Our hearing is, we process information like 400 times faster than when someone's speaking. It's crazy. So forcing yourself to focus on what someone's saying, and then being curious and asking, well, why is it that you're saying that? Give some examples, and you could be quite surprised at what people have to say.
So the idea, I like this idea, because what you're doing is you're kind of reversing the expectation, because if I'm not creating a psychologically safe environment, those individuals are usually not listening, and they're usually not curious because they think they know everything. So there's arrogance there and some pridefulness or whatever. So if I reverse that through behaviors that show that I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to put effort, I'm being vulnerable, which is another element that you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, I may not be good at these things. Tell me more about that. And they're like going, are you sure? Like, why are you asking me questions all of a sudden? You've never asked me questions before. It's this part of them saying, well, I'm trying. Like, I'm trying to work on this. I realize I've burned some bridges before. I'm trying to work on this thing. And so over time, you're saying that those little micro moments will end up building trust, helping us have open lines of communication, and then creating that psychologically safe environment.
Yeah. Let me give you a hospital example of how this kind of works out. Suppose you work at a hospital, you're there, and one of the things that the consultants have discovered is that doctors are not washing their hands consistently as they should be. They wash their hands wrong, and there's actually been some real stories where doctors say, oh, we all wash our hands, whatever, and they hold up a special light, and they show how they have germs on their hands, etc. Well, here's when psychological safety really kicks in. You're a doctor. You just finish with a patient and you walk out and you don't wash your hands. A janitor standing right there says, hey, doc, did you wash your hands when you came out? Because you're not drying your hands like other doctors do. That is a crucial moment. What I mean by that is, if I berate or talk down to that janitor, everyone's going to know about it. But if I look at that janitor and said, you know what? You're right. I screwed up, and thank you for holding me accountable. I'm going to go back in and wash my hands. That experience is going to reverberate all over the hospital, and people are going to hear, hey, Dr. Waldron, he actually wants people to talk to him. He's open to it, and he admitted he made a mistake. So that's a crucial moment. So when your team members are saying something and you're receptive, it's going to build psychological safety, because another team member say, hey, Gary just talked to Skot, and Skot listened. I'm going to say something now. And it becomes this build that you have around psychological safety.
That's so good. You know what the best part of that whole story was? You calling me Dr. Waldron. That has never been done before. Oh, you have to call me Dr. Waldron the rest of the interview, Gary. But
you got it, Doc.
But so let's wrap this thing up. This has been so good. I haven't had a show where I focus just on psychological safety. So I think this is important, especially from Google's research and the Project Aristotle. So if you haven't looked at that, everybody just Google Project Aristotle. It comes up and you can read. They've got the information in there and you can read about that. Gary, if people want to hire you to speak, if they want you to come out and help them a little bit with this idea, maybe they want to check out one of your books, what do they do to get in touch with you? How do they do that?
Yeah. First, look me up on LinkedIn and connect with me. I'm open to that. But GaryADePaul.com is my website. It's a pretty simple one. It has all my books on there. And the big one that I have is 9 practices of 21st century 9 practices of 21st century leadership. It's all evidence-based research that I did. Really cool stuff. So the website, I'm on Speaker Hub. You can find me there as well.
Okay.
So yeah, come find me.
Good. Well, look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing what the future looks like for you. Good luck with the new book edition and the speaking career and everything you're doing. I took so many notes from that episode. I don't really even know which one to list. I'm just going to go through them because there's so many. I loved this idea of hoofbeats, and we just assume they're horses, but maybe they're zebras. I love that concept and how quickly we are to assume we know the solution when really what it's going to take is invitation, curiosity, collaboration, vulnerability, those types of things to really engage our people. Asking questions is one piece of that. So that's great. But we also need to help them have ownership in it. And that's where they, as a group, as others, are going to come up with a solution. They come up with a solution, there's more buy-in. There's more of an investment and more of that idea of, well, this is partly me. So I need to help contribute to the success of this thing. Own it, being vulnerable, involving others, listening, those key elements. And then let's take some action here. Let's discuss psychological safety with our team. So call to action. Go ahead and do that next time. Ask your team, what is psychological safety? What can we do to create more psychological safety inside of our workplace and what we're doing here? Do that and hold each other accountable. Now, in order to truly do that, you need to have some element of psychological safety. Yeah, I get it. So let's work on that. And how do we create that? Well, that goes on through building trust. It's a slower process. And I always say this, my first guest, Dave Anderson, says it. It's over time, not overnight. So be patient. It grows and you will build that trust and the psychological safety as you move further on through time with those people. If you want to find out more information about me, you can go to skotwaldron.com. You can go subscribe, comment on this YouTube post, on my LinkedIn profile, find me. You can go to anywhere you listen to podcasts, find my show there. It pops up in your feed. Follow it, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, because I really, really, really want to help you and empower you. And I hope that that's what I'm doing. So until next time, I will see you on another episode of Unlocked.